Welcome to Discourse, a podcast about music as a medium for conversation. Our guest today is Jess Klein, a folk Americana singer-songwriter and activist. Her podcast, Jess Klein's Big Table, explores the intersection of ancestors, art, and activism. Jess, I love this line that's on your website. It says, creating at the crossroads of healing and activism. Have you always been an activist, or did that kind of come from your music?
I think I was kind of raised by my mom to see what's going on around us and how do we get involved and go stand with people who are advocating for themselves. So I feel in that way is kind of in my lineage. And when I started writing, it kind of came out of me naturally. So I think they've always been kind of interwoven for me.
Nice. So how did you begin with music?
I was a college student and I I was a women's studies major, and I had an opportunity to study abroad in Kingston, Jamaica. And
Oh, wow.
I was just learning a lot about the world and about America from outside of America. And the woman who led the course was just incredible. And so I just was taking in a lot, my young mind was like soaking in a lot, and I was already into writing. I was already into writing short stories, and I had a guitar I'd borrowed from my dad when I went down there, and I just started kind of putting them into songs while I was there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, our theme this week is advocacy. This is also the final episode of our first season, so I think we're ending on a high note. I hope it's encouraging for all of our listeners. So let's get into it. Music starts in 3, 2, 1. This first song is Say Her Name, Hell You Talkin' Bout by Janelle Monáe. It was released on Say Her Name, Hell You Talkin' Bout on Wonderland Arts Society in 2021. And this is actually the updated version. The original was released in 2015, was a bit shorter. So we might not run through the whole program. But yeah, Jess, tell us about this song.
Well, I think one thing that's so brilliant about this song is just how there's a whole life and a whole story in each person's name, and saying someone's name is such an important piece of remembering them. And even though we don't necessarily know everything about each of the stories behind these names, saying someone's name is just a powerful way to remember them and keep their story alive and fight the narrative that wants to take it away.
And there are over 50 names in this version.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm immediately thinking about in the media how different victims are treated and covered, those different stories. So I do think the song is very powerful, and just naming over, like you said, 50 different names of people who have had unjust ends to their life. Um, and just remembering people, I think, is important in all cultures. And so to think about this being in music and art and how it's so political, just being able to say somebody's name and say they existed, tell their story beyond what tragic thing happened to them is really important. So, great song choice to start us off with.
And also, I feel like humanizes them, right? Because I think like when we give somebody a name or anything a name, you're showing, that they were a person, and that gives them the whole context of what comes with being a person, which is that everybody has a life and a livelihood and a family that, is suffering behind that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I think it's very easy for, when these people are killed, especially when police are involved, to kind of villainize them, and they're just, kind of the aggressor in a situation, which isn't always true. And it's just so easy to lose that humanity in them. I think it's really important to bring that back in.
Yeah. Especially as we go into this new election,
yes.
this new administration. Not to get political, but this is an activism episode.
Right. No politics in activism.
And also I feel like this, especially for me, like with the war in Palestine, I think, over the last, 25 years, it's about to be, that we have also, given this image of what outsiders are and who they are, and, that everyone that is not the cookie cutter white agenda person is other and is evil. And I think, like, when we look at the death toll in Palestine, for example, that it's like 40,000 people, 50,000 people, women, children, like, you don't give those faces names. It just seem like mountains of people, but it's still, when you see these images of people online or activists that are sharing this on social media, journalists, then it's like, now it affects you, because now now you can't look away because it's a person with a name and they're talking to you, And that could be you.
Yeah, it changes the narrative of the story that we're fed.
Mm.
Yeah.
I also like that or they're asking us, like, you say her name. It's not just Janelle Monáe is saying their name. It's like, you say this person's name and you feel in your body what it is to say the name of this person who was killed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a beautiful tribute and way to pay respect to people. Like we said, and Carla said, adding back the humanity of someone's story in their life. Um, and I'm thinking about trans people when they change their name, learning somebody's name and continuing to say that with respect and actual care. Um, my name is difficult to pronounce, but I will take the time to help people say my name because my mom took time to, name me, and she saw a future for me. So I think about just like the future lost to people who lost their lives, um, and how we can still carry them forward with us by saying their name, remembering who they are, and what the loss was, because we do lose so much in society to violence that's really unnecessary. Um, so many futures lost. It's immeasurable.
All right, I think it's time to move on to the next song. All right, this is What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. It was released on What a Wonderful World on Verb Music in 1968. Raja, tell us about this song.
I have been in choirs, some kind of singing ensemble for over 10 years, and this song has always come up. I think in my youth, I just enjoyed singing it, hearing the different melodies, and then singing with like a group of people has always been powerful. It's something that has been really intimate for me. But as I got older, I started listening to the song more and realizing how much of kind of like a protest this song is, because it's taking time to practice gratitude and appreciate all the beautiful things in the world, and just a great reminder to connect with nature in taking care of yourself so that you can continue to be active and advocate for others. Um, so just like Armstrong is saying, I see trees of green, red roses, like taking the time to name things you're grateful for in your life can help you stay strong, essentially, but also remind you that you still have a beautiful life in spite of all the things that are going on in the world. And so I always come back to this song to remind myself of that, as I'm processing all the things and preparing for the things to come.
I think this song is a great example of just focusing on the potential of the world around us. Like, you need that kind of fuel to be an activist in any form.
And his voice is just so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful. I don't think I ever thought of this song in that context, but it's really beautiful.
Right, this next song is Latino America by Calle 13. It was released on Entre los que Quieran on 5020 Records 2010. I hope I pronounced that right. Carla, tell us about this song.
Yeah, so Latin America, this song, Calle 13 is like a reggaeton group that became, very popular with the song that they have called Atrévete. And they have a lot of activism songs, and this song it goes with, like, it features Totola Pomposina, Sonavaca, and Maya Rita. And it talks about, the colonization of Latin America, but it also talks about, what has been left behind and like everything that spans Latin America, because a lot of the times when people speak about Latin America, they think that it's one group. They think about workers, right? Like the people that pick up our agriculture, that do our construction, that do all of these things, and that it's still, three continents that are very much exploited, right? Because Latin America is composed of the Caribbean, parts of North America, Central America, and South America. And there's 22 countries in full that compose Latin America. And so, I think it's a very beautiful song for activism because, it talks about all the wins of Latin Americans, una canasta con frijoles, soy Maradona contra Inglaterra, anotándote 2 goles, all of these, Latin American heroes in soccer, and the diversity of our skin colors, the diversity of our food, but then again, all of the political oppression that happens, all of the gender-based violence that happens. So, the chorus is very interesting because, it says, tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar el sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor. Like, you can't buy, nature pretty much, right? Like, you can't buy the wind, you can't buy the sun, you can't buy rain or heat. And I mean, and the music video for this is just such a beauty. And so, yeah, I feel like every time I listen to it as a Latin American woman, I feel a lot of pride for the song.
And just in the composition of the music, you can hear like the passion and the seriousness in the tone. Very complimentary of what is being said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now somebody is singing in Portuguese, for example. So, just talks about the diversity, and also, there's a lot of colorism in Latin America, and of course, preference for whiter Latin Americans, me being white passing, right? But There's in the Caribbean, it's an issue of like being white or Arab, or like mixed with white, Arab, Chinese, and black. And then when you go to the mainland, it's also the added indigenous aspect of it. So the song also like calls out how even amongst Latin Americans and outside of Latin America, that people are being treated differently because of the way that they look, because of their skin color, because of their heritage. And so it talks about wanting to change that, and wanting, to fight for our rights for everyone, not just for one type of Latin American. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much diversity in, even just in the people who have come to the U.S., and the white folks here just don't get it.
Yeah, I was Mexican for 6 years.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, this next song is "Know Your Rights" by The Clash. It was released on Combat Rock on CBS Records in 1982. So this is my pick. I feel like this is just a classic, like, resistance song. So the whole thing is about knowing your rights, all three of them. Number one is the right not to be killed unless it was by a policeman or an aristocrat. Number two is the right to food money, provided, of course, you agree to be investigated, humiliated, kind of losing that right to privacy in exchange. Number three is the right to free speech, as long as it is not the truth. So, this is very, very The Clash. They're part of the original punk movement, which kind of was born in London in the 70s. It was a bunch of mostly kids, really, like teenagers, squatting in abandoned buildings, and that classism was a big thing in there. And, overall the movement was very anti-capitalist and, about supporting your community. And I think in some groups, punk kind of gets a bad rap for being like violent, and there's the smashing of guitars and things, which, The Clash is also known for. But it's, there was a protest. It's, calling out commercialism, materialism. And actually, there's a great documentary about Joe Strummer. It's called Joe Strummer, The Future is Unwritten. It goes into a lot of that movement and kind of his kind of journey through that and beyond. It's fantastic. I highly recommend that. But yeah, I feel like you can't really talk about protests and advocacy without mentioning kind of that punk movement. And this still feels so relevant, especially, when there were so many protests happening in the U.S., still relevant.
I feel like it's so helpful to... I'm sorry. Did I cut?
Oh, no, I was just saying, unfortunately, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I feel like it's really helpful to look at movements outside of the U.S. For what worked, and for, just seeing patterns and how people came together and fought back. And yeah, I'm a huge Clash fan, so it was nice to hear this. But I feel like, I feel like in the U.S., for whatever reasons, we have this image of England as like fancy and like whatever. Yeah. But there's just like such a long history of protest, labor movement, and it's cool to be reminded of.
Yeah, I used to live in London, and now living in Europe, I can say that like one thing that I really admire about Europeans is that when they have an issue with something, they take the streets. Like they're not
especially
like,
the French.
Well, Yes, yes. And the Spanish too, I'm learning. The Spanish also. You raised our rents? Well, we're collectively not paying rent. Oh, you didn't come and help us? Well, we are throwing mud at the king.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that is round one. It is time for a message from our sponsor. We don't have any yet, so usually this is a free promotion for something I love. But this week I thought it would be better to have more of a call to action. So if you want to be more of an activist, but you don't really know where to start, my recommendation is just to find an organization that's already doing the work. The ACLU will be very busy over the next few years. They're a good group to support. They, challenge laws by representing people that are affected by them. There are a lot of state level orgs that focus on reproductive rights. Here we have Pro-Choice North Carolina. They work directly with legislators. You can start small, go to events, connect with people, just support the organizations that you care about and connect with other people that support them. So that's how we make an impact. Yep. Yeah. All right, let's get into round two.
Oh my God, I see you all. I love it. I can see you moving.
Hey.
This
first song is Negative Vibes by Damian Dempsey. It was released on Seize the Day on Clear Records in 2003. Jess, tell us about this song.
Yeah. Oh man. So I was introduced to Damian's, my hand is on my heart right now because when I hear this man sing, it just cuts right into my heart and makes me feel so much. But I was first introduced to his music. We were put on tour together a number of years ago, and it wasn't this song. It was an album he released called Shots, but it was so raw, such a powerful voice, and just speaking so humbly and vulnerably and powerfully about the way that his people had the oppression that they suffered at the hands of the British, and just the experience of the Irish, diaspora, and just standing up for people, and this song in particular, I just think it's so it's so simple in a way, and he sounds like someone just reading a page from his diary. It's almost kind of funny because it's so literal in a way, but it's just, I just love, you can just hear how important it is for him to stay positive and to encourage other people to do the same no matter what they're facing.
I love it's very the song is simple in a lot of ways. There's not a lot of instruments. I like that kind of intimate feel that kind of creates.
He's also he was a professional boxer. He's big. He's a big,
oh wow,
muscular Irish guy, and I think he gets up and he sings these songs that are so vulnerable. So there's a seeming dichotomy there that's really powerful. That he's not just all machismo. He's very vulnerable.
I love seeing big, strong man doing that. We need more of that. Yes. Show us that masculine is not, all of the terrible things that we see.
Mm. Yeah, this is funny because I was watching an interview with Barry Keoghan on Hot Ones, and they were asking him why he thought boxing was such a big part of Irish culture, and he was like, well, I guess it's just our history, right? All that we've had to endure.
Mm.
He was also, when I toured with him, he was the first person who told me that I should learn more about my ancestry, and I had never really dug into it at all, but he was like, I can't replicate his accent, but he said in a very charming accent, like, you know, it'll give you strength. It'll give you like a sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself.
And I love when people who sing in English sing with their accent as well.
Mm. Yeah, for some reason, I'm always drawn to like British musicians. Like, I'll find a new song and I'm like, oh, I really like this. Oh, they're British. That's why. I don't know what it is.
I mean,
Also-
my first crush was Sting, so I understand.
Another thing he told me was that like a lot of British or Irish singers will like adopt an American accent, and he was like, I tried that, it didn't sound like me. So you can really hear his Irish brogue a little more in his singing. He's very him. I think that's really cool.
It is. This next song is Land of the Free by Joey Badass. It was released on All American Badass, on Pro Era, and Cinematic Music Group in 2017. Raja, tell us about this song.
Yeah, this song came out 50 years after the Louis Armstrong song, and I think it's still addressing some of the same issues that still exist, but in a more direct way. Really just addressing things like mass incarceration, economic inequality, also just systemic oppression, health crises, as far as being fearful of going to the doctor for proactive care. So many different things about the reality of America, and I just love the contrast in the two songs, specifically seeing how the world can be beautiful and that potential the world, our country has, and then with Joey Badass really seeing that America has not lived up to its ideals and what is promised, because it's not something that everybody can achieve. But what is the American dream, and what does that really look like if it's limited to certain people? Yeah, and just the way the music is simple so that you can catch all of the deep things that he's saying, I think is important. And he also mentions like America with the 3Ks, and just that history of racism, and it's rooted throughout all of our history.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you say about not living up to that kind of promise of the America that we said we were going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that just don't make sense to me in this country. Like, why are we so opposed to giving healthcare to everybody? Like, every other like major nation in the world does this. Why is that such like a liberal idea in our mindset?
It's weird.
It is.
If everybody was healthier, we literally could be living better lives.
Yeah.
You wouldn't run into so many people who are angry or talking to themselves because they would be able to get the help they need. You could reduce homelessness. You could also take care of people's food insecurity. There are so many things that just, like that don't make sense, and it's interesting how we allow this to continue for just a little bit of I'm better than you. At least I can say I'm better than you. But it's, yeah, so many distractions. Yeah. And it just shows how much progress and how far we really still need to go.
Yeah. I feel like in our history, like we have bubbles where we feel like, things are great. We've made so much progress, and then that bubble always gets popped.
Every
And
time.
we're
It's
in a
that
popped bubble
retaliation.
era. Yeah.
I feel
And
like
somehow,
oh, go ahead.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I just was gonna say that I feel like there's just so much denial about what our history really looked like that until that changes, like we're not even looking at the same story. Like we're looking literally at different stories. And people are really attached to the simpler one, and it's not the real
Yeah.
one.
That America needs to go to therapy.
Yes, collectively.
Right. This next song is Labor the Cacophony by Paris Paloma. It was released on Labor the Cacophony on Paris Paloma and Network Music Group 2024. Carla, tell us about this song.
Yeah, so I actually came across this song on Instagram. And one of the things that I loved about it is that, I feel like with everything that's happening to women in US politics right now, I feel like politicians in the States, especially male politicians, try to encapsulate women as these weak beings that like they need to look after and protect and protect the rights of children. And I love, she has lyrics like in the song that says, like, if we had a daughter, I'd watch and could not save her. The emotional torture from the head of your high table. She'd do what you taught her. She'd meet the same cruel fate. So now I've got to run so I can undo that mistake. And I think, that is so strong because I feel like even with the 4B movement is like, yeah, we're bringing forth children to this, to live this. And another beautiful part of the lyrics is, she says, all day, every day, therapist, mother, maid, nymph and a virgin, nurse and a servant, just an appendage, live to attend him so that he never lifts a finger, 24/7 baby machine, so he can live out his picket fence dreams. It's not an act of love if you make me do too much labor. And like, I feel like I heard those lyrics and I was like, whoa, yeah, feels like pretty much everything that we do has this labor in front, right? Like, why is it that our existences have to be laced with pain? Why are we forced to do what we don't want to do with our bodies? Why do we have to, live like that?
Yeah, this song was all over TikTok for a long time. Women channeling their ancestral rage.
I was going to say
It's
that
very
too.
powerful.
But it's weird to me how we end up here where we are. Thinking about the recent election, we have songs and movements like this, the 4B movement. We're acknowledging what the reality is, how difficult life is, and we still get here. I'm really confused. I think it speaks to how systems indoctrinate us since birth, essentially, and how we can have songs that speak exactly to what the issue is, and we still miss the mark when it is our time to show up and do what it is we need to do so that we can have a better future for the kids that we want to bring into the world. And I'm just really confused. Yeah, this is a powerful song, but were we really listening? Were people really listening to people who are having these conversations? Like, are we really listening? And why did I'm saying we as in women, but why did we end up and how do we end up here?
Those are excellent questions that I do not have an answer to. All right, this next song is Mumia's Song by Anti-Flag. It was released on Mobilize on AF Records in 2002. So Anti-Flag is another more modern punk band. They are very political in their songs, and this one is, Mumia's Song is about Mumia Abu Jamal. And it has a general message like free all political prisoners, kind of talking about his case as it applies to like more broader things. So I have like 2 minutes to tell you all about Mumia. I will do my best. So he was a political activist and journalist. He spent most of his life on death row. He's still in prison. He was convicted in 1982 of murdering a Philadelphia police officer. He has maintained his innocence the whole time. His death sentence was stayed back in like 2011, I think. Amnesty International has said the proceedings were in violation of minimum international standards that govern fair trial procedures and use of the death penalty. They're like, there's this big movement that's like he should not be on death row, and he's written several books. I've only read one, but I recommend those as well. So he was heavily involved in the Black Panther Party in Philadelphia. He also joined MOVE after covering them as a journalist. He was elected president of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. So this was like, a successful man in the community. So he was accused of shooting this officer. What happened? He was driving a taxi a couple nights a week to supplement his income. Around like 4 a.m., he saw an officer in an altercation with his brother. Apparently he was just in the area and this happened. He got involved and the cop ended up shot in the back and face. Mumia was shot in the stomach. The legal process, like all the witnesses were questioned, is not very reliable. There are theories that, I ran out of time already. Later in 99, someone actually came forward and confessed to doing the shooting as a hitman for the mob, but that there was some question of whether or not that was a reliable testimony. So it's a very complicated thing, and this also happened before the MOVE bombing. If you're not familiar with that, in 1985, the police bombed a neighborhood in Philadelphia because the MOVE organization was headquartered there. So there's a lot, like if you are someone who trusts, the police in general and, government in general, like look into things like that because you might not want to. So that's my very condensed summary of what happened, but like these are the type of people that we need to pay more attention to and, learn their stories and get educated.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, it is time for a production note. Discourse is produced in partnership with Hey Awesome Girl, a full-service marketing and creative studio on a mission to help female entrepreneurs build and grow companies that empower their lives. Become a part of their awesome community by visiting heyawesomegirl.com/grow. All right, let's get into round 3. So this first song is Never Gonna Break Me by Jess Klein. Jess, tell us about this song.
Yeah, I wrote this song thinking about an episode that happened when I was a teenager. I hooked up with this boy and then he slut-shamed me to his buddies at school. And, I never spent that much time thinking about it through my life, but when I started writing about it and thinking about what a metaphor that is for the experiences of so many girls and women, I felt like, okay, this is an important story to tell. And there was a lot of just like primal rage in me when I felt like the guitar in my hand and I was singing the song, and I thought about like just the things that we don't necessarily know are going on inside us, but are still affecting us. And it, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I do. I like, well, I love female rage songs. Like, it's definitely, one of those genres that I definitely gravitate to. And I love that, I like how this is not like really ragey, but it's still, it plugs into that kind of source for the rage that I feel as a woman. Those stupid boys and their slut shaming, like, it's so ridiculous that they do that.
It is ridiculous.
Like, there's a great sound to this song, and I love the message that you have with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just the never gonna break me, like, that kind of invincibility that you kind of have to find as a woman, I think.
Yeah, I think I felt like when I look back on this, my personal struggles or whatever, I found a strength inside myself that I did not know that I had. And that's always good to be able to tap into. I think that, yeah, I think that we grow up with such like a victim narrative, and there's like there can be like a conditioned helplessness, at least I feel like I have had that inside myself, and having to learn like no, I can't control what other people do, but I can control how I think about myself and my power. Yeah.
I think this is a great example of positive self-talk and like reframing it and telling people you're not gonna break me. I really like this. Yeah. Beautiful.
Thanks.
And I was so excited I forgot to list the credits. It was released on When We Rise on Motherlode Records in 2023. So this next song is All Nations Rise by Lila June. It was released as a single on 2572839 Records DK in 2020. Raja, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so in elementary school, I I think each year there would be a powwow held near Durham Tech Community College before they had a lot of buildings there. And so they would host powwows, and our school would literally just walk down the street and we'd attend them, and we would watch the performances. We would be able to purchase things. I remember buying like a handmade beaded bag. And while there, we learned a lot about the culture. Different tribes were represented. We also got to smell like different foods and different things that they would burn for cleansing, and those different purposes there. Also, just being able to connect with people. Um, it felt sacred being let into that space. It was so welcoming. Um, and this song really reminds me of just like resilience, and thinking about indigenous people and their existence on reservations. And I remember learning that on reservations they don't have police. The FBI serves as the authority there. And so, in addition to that interesting involvement with law enforcement through the FBI, there are a lot of missing and murdered indigenous women. So, a lot of violence, gender based violence, domestic abuse, alcoholism, lack of access to clean water, like Flint, Michigan here, all over, and that's in the U.S. that people are living below poverty lines in a place that is meant to be a protected space for them to still have access to their cultural and ancestral land. And then this song, you hear her say, we're warriors of love with forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as arrows. I pull back and let it go. just that connection of spirituality with advocacy reminds me just too about those parallels in different cultures of connecting your faith with your movement, and really reminds me also of the hymn "His Eye is on a Sparrow," and just having the faith that things will be taken care of through forgiveness. So even after being so devastated, still being able to show up strong in love, with love, and moving, speaking up against so many injustices, um, so many different things. And you can hear the different languages being spoken, um, and just talking through also mimics, like sitting around the fire and talking and sharing those stories, passing down from generation to generation. Yeah, just a lot of things brought up with this song.
Yeah, and this I actually wrote an article about the murder of Gabby Petito a couple of years ago, and the article was about how basically her disappearance was covered by every major U.S. outlet and was like a huge media coverage situation, whereas so many Indigenous women get, they're murdered in that part of the country every year, and they don't even get a fraction of the media attention. Um, and they're constant victims of, gender based violence, of murder, of abuse, and no one covers it.
So I played with the order on this round because I want to end with Carla's selection. This is DGAF by 1876. It was released on Powwow Punk Rock 3 on 1876 in 2022. So this, very similar topic with this song. This group is out of Portland, Oregon. It is Native Indigenous members. They fuse kind of punk rock with powwow style. So like the drums are very similar to, what you'd hear at a powwow. And they're named for the year of the Battle of Little Bighorn, which Custer's Last Stand, a very big event in American history. So their bio on their website says 1876 proudly represents both the Northern Cheyenne and the Blackfeet nations, singing in both languages. From sweat lodges to punk clubs, 1876 helped shed light on a narrative often neglected by the music industry. 1876 was born in 2020 out of a dream of cultural and language resurgence being seen and produced by those who experience the hardships and triumphs. This song in particular, DGAF, stands for Don't Give a Fuck. It's calling out that whole idea of, the missing women and the, not having coverage from main media outlets. 1876 is the year of Battle of Little Bighorn. It was the Lakota Sioux and North Cheyenne defeating the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment. So, think that history connecting like who they are as people is like very close. So I love that, they have that connection. So the lyrics in the song, I'm losing cousins by the dozen, but it doesn't seem to be enough to warrant any coverage like media is covering up. And now they're hunting our women, and now they're hunting the girls, non-binary bodies hanging, but it's not your concern. So, very much calling out those things. And I think especially the non-binary people, because that's, another group that really doesn't get acknowledged, but is a bigger part in Native American cultures often. Okay, another one with lots of information. Sorry to info dump. This is our last song, Imagine by John Lennon. It was released on Imagine on Apple Records in 1971. Carla, tell us about this song.
Yeah, so, I feel like this is like an ode to peace. And this is a song that I feel like it's almost like a prayer, right? Like, could you imagine a world where people can live in peace, where everyone can be happy, where there's not just some groups of people that are okay, um, you know, imagine there's no country, imagine no religion, and all of these things that separate us as human beings, which at the end of the day are all inventions. They're all things that we made up. It's not, if you look at little children, children, they're guided by their hearts and very little by their brain. And, if you tell children, no, you can't play with this other child because of their religion or their skin color or where they're from, kids kind of like look at you weird, right? Because I feel like at heart, human beings are not these separatist monsters that we're sort of, I feel like we see more of. And yeah, I've always loved the song, and my family used to do a lot of karaoke and we always closed with this song. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways it's just saying imagine a world that's focused on empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like even when it was released, it was very widely accepted, but also widely rejected. Because then you have to sort of like all these calls for peace seem naive, but they tend to seem naive from the people who refuse to simply be empathetic and let the other person live, happy as they are, as long as they're not hurting anybody, right?
No.
I like how you said, Carla, like we made this stuff up, because I feel like I hear it from a lot of activists, like, well, this is someone's dream that we're living in right now. Like, someone imagined this, so
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's better. No factual, like, I have a gay friend who has undergone a lot of self-hatred and like culturally imposed homophobia, but he still has it and feels it because he feels it's wrong to be gay. And I always, he's very religious, and I always tell him, I'm like, do you really think that a God that putting your religion into context, do you really think that a God that created you, that created the world, and supposedly created you in his image, like, would hate women, would hate gay people, would hate children? Like, do you really think that makes sense? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But then he comes off with something else he's heard in church, and he's like, but, in church they say that blah, 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 blah. And it's just stuff that we made up.
Yeah. Everything's all made up.
Yeah.
Well, that is our show. Jess, I'm going to pick you for the winner this week. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you online?
JessKlein.com, and I have a Substack. Just look me up, Jess Klein, and that's what I prefer because I kind of trust social media less and less, but I am on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and Spotify and all the places. But long term, I'd prefer that you find me on my Substack.
Awesome. We will be back with another season later this year. So stay tuned. You can follow us everywhere at Discourse Podcast. That's Discourse with 2 C's. And of course, find all the playlists on Spotify and Tidal. Thank you so much for listening. You've been a wonderful audience. Good night.